everybody, I'm Allie Buchman with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to be doing a project using our faceted round trios today. It's just going to be a simple peyote, but a little bit of a kind of zigzag pattern for you guys. That way, if you already know peyote and it's a video that may be below your level, you'll still get something out of it. For you beginners, don't worry, we're going to be really clear and get the project started and ended, and you'll be able to follow along as well. So I'm going to be using faceted round trios and also a round trio bead. They're the same size, they're 6 millimeter, and they have 3 holes. So when you're looking at them, they're going to have 3 holes right there in the middle. 1, 2, 3. A center hole and then the 2 side holes. For this project, I'm actually going to be ignoring the center hole. The center hole actually was produced there in order that the beads could be faceted. So that's the whole reason for that 3rd hole, but it does allow for some variety with some different patterns. But we're just going to be sticking to the outer 2 holes as we work our project up here. It's getting close to fall and wonderful fall weather here in Maryland, and what I'm going to be doing is using some fall colors to create this peyote stitch bracelet. I have the round trio in the jet bronze color, and then I have the faceted round trios in the crystal capri gold as well as the magic wine. So I almost have that changing of the seasons and the tree leaves colors going on. I'm also going to be using some 15-0 seed beads, and I'm using them in the crystal apricot color, and that again going really well in with our fall tones. I'm going to close it all off with a magic wine PC button, a faceted button, and that's going to be the clasp closure for our bracelet using these colors and this design. I have handy a size 10 needle, which I'm going to be using for stringing all my beads. This is a Pony brand needle, and I'm using 0.006 green wildfire thread. I also have some super new glue sitting here handy, a thread burner, and I have the Thread Zap 2. You could use the Thread Zap Ultra, and I also have my slip and snip pliers. I'm working on a bead mat, and that's going to keep my products from kind of moving around. And these products you can get online or at our stores. Actually, if you look at the details and right under the video, kind of the show more button, that'll give you links to all of this if you do need to purchase any any products for this project. To get started, I'm going to lay the beads out to kind of give you an idea of what we are going to be doing. We're going to be doing a peyote stitch 4 wide, so it's going to be an even count peyote. And I'm going to be using my jet bronze as pretty much a divider between the faceted beads. So again, these are 6 millimeter, so I'm going to dump kind of little piles of each here. And I do already have my needle threaded. When I thread my needle, I tend to use my slip and snip scissors, and then I take a pliers and actually flatten out that thread. It allows you to thread your needle a little bit easier. As I'm pouring these out too, I'm going to pour out a little bit of 15-0s and have those ready to use, because we're going to use those just a tiny bit on the side, and really their whole purpose is going to be to hide thread on the side. What we're going to be doing is creating almost like a zigzag effect where we're going to be stacking beads in a zigzag fashion. So when you're looking at it here, and I'm stacking these for you to get the idea here, you're going to have almost like a step going up. That we're again going to be using our jet bronze here as our divider, and then adding our faceted beads. So if you look here, this is going to be kind of our peyote style here, is that we're going to be doing almost like a zigzag going up or a little step. That's the design that we're doing. You're going to see the jet bronze, and then with the peyote stitch, it'll actually sit up a little bit more. But we're going to be doing 2 basically in a row because we're going 4 wide. So that being said, we are going to get started. I'm just going to get my beads back in piles. Get the correct ones with the correct beads. And the first thing I'm going to do to my thread after I've threaded the needle is I'm going to add a stop bead to the project. I'm going to be adding my faceted button here at the very end, and then my loop as we go to the end as well. So really what I'm going to do right now is just create a stop, so that way my peyote design has somewhere to stop and just doesn't fall off the bottom of the thread. To do that, I'm picking up an 11/0 seed bead that I had just laying on the bead mat. I always think it's important to use your stop bead as something that is not in your project, so that way it doesn't be mistaken for being part of your project. I'm going to let that stop bead drop down to the base of my thread, leaving about 10 inches at the end of the thread. This 10 inches at the end is going to be used to add my loop for my button when I get done the project. I'm going to take my needle and thread through that stop bead, going away from those 10-inch tail, and do that 2 times. That's going to put your wildfire thread 2 times on the outside of the bead, and that's just going to create a stop so that way your beads don't fall off the end. Again, we're going to be using just 2 holes of the RounTrio beads. We're going to be using the outer holes and just kind of skipping the middle hole for this. You could do another design where you use the middle hole and put some 15s or 11s kind of in the middle, but I'm going to keep it real simple for you guys. So to keep it simple, you're going to think about the fact that we're going to use 4 beads to start. And again, I'm going through the bottom hole, and I'm going to use 2 of my bronze color, and then I'm going to pick up 2 of my magic wine color. I'm going to let all 4 of those beads drop down to my stop bead and let them set up. When I'm working with this here, how you're going to look at it is that you're going to be using the bead closest to the stop bead there. You're going to be on the upper hole. The next jet bronze, you're going to be on the lower, upper, lower. What that's going to do is when we come back, we'll be able to kind of even this out here with seed beads, but that gets our peyote started and ready to go already. The nice thing with multi-holed beads is you can really simply and quickly do your peyote stitch and learn that peyote stitch because you have an open hole to grab onto. When you're at the end of your row of 4, you're going to take 4 of your 15/0 seed beads and put those on your needle. I'm going to let those drop down next to my last faceted RounTrio. I'm going to take my needle then and going towards the stop bead, skipping the middle hole of that faceted RounTrio. Remember, just kind of ignore that middle hole the whole project. We're going to hit the top hole of that, and my needle is going to be going towards my stop bead. So it's coming back the project. Once I have that one there, I'm going to add another bead to sit right above. So I'm going back now the opposite way. I'm going to be adding 2 beads per row, and every time I add a bead, I want to make sure to go through one of the outer holes. I'm going to be adding the color of the bead that I'm sewing into. So I'm sewing into a bronze color and I'm adding a bronze. That's going to create that diagonal step up. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my next color. So I'm going to add my Crystal Capri. After I add my Crystal Capri and that drops down, we're going to do just like we did on this side where we add 4 of our 15/0s. We're going to sew from the bottom hole to the top hole of that Crystal Capri. Give a nice tight pull. Once we have that, then we are going to go in and add another of the Crystal Capri and then sew through the bronze. And there we go. Once you're out this side, you always know that you add 2 beads every time you're going in one direction and then 2 when you switch. To get that line established, we want to add 1 more of the jet bronze, again through one of the outer holes. When I get here to the end, I'm going to add 4 of my 15/0s. sew through the upper hole and come back the other direction. Once I'm coming out, then I'm going to add the color of the bead that I'm sewing into, which is my capri here. And I have that pattern established and started. When I'm coming out the end, I know that I want to separate my colors, so I'm going to add a jet bronze. The jet bronze lines are always going to work as a separator for my design here. Once I have that jet bronze bead on, we're going to use our 15-0s, 4 of them. So from the bottom hole to the top hole, coming back towards the other side. The nice thing with this bracelet is because the beads are rather large compared to, say, an 11-0 seed bead, you're going to get this peyote stitch bracelet done very quickly. Once I'm coming out here, the end, you can see my beginning row here. It's going to be 4 wide, kind of doing that zigzag. Picking up my last of my crystal capri. I'm going to add my 4 beads and come back the other way. One thing that I contemplated just a couple minutes ago was actually creating a zigzag, like I had said, creating kind of triangles of color in between the lines. So you can really change up the peyote. I'll try to make one of those too, so that we can just see it in a different video. But now that I'm coming back the other way, I'm just going to keep going with those lines. And I like the brass as my kind of divider. Once I'm out here after the brass line, I know that I've gone with my crystal capri. Now it's back to that magic wine. At the end of each row here, you're going to go in and add 4. So it really just repeats, and once you get the pattern established and knowing kind of which colors to start out with, it's a very easy pattern to follow. You can do the same pattern too, this diagonal pattern, with any type of seed bead. So it doesn't have to be a faceted or a smooth round trio. It can really be anything. And you're just going to keep going right along, creating those lines. And I'm going to keep going. I'm ready then to add my last of my bronze, which is going to finish up that line. What I generally do is, as I add my last bead on the end, I also add my seed beads before letting it drop down, and that makes it quicker for me to come back the other way. Once you're coming back the other way, you're just going to follow your line. And you can look up and down the sides of it to see what bead needs to come next. On the side, it's always going to alternate between magic wine, bronze, crystal capri, bronze, magic wine, bronze, crystal capri, bronze. So that's going to be the pattern on either side too. So if you get caught up, you can write that down. That'll keep you going as far as staying in order. When you're done with about 6 3/4 inches of this bracelet, we'll come back and I'll actually show you how to attach your faceted button and actually make your loop on the other end, so that way you can wear your bracelet. So I've reached the end of my length here and have that diagonal pattern going on. And what I'm going to get ready to do is add my button clasp. And what I'm going to do to add the button clasp is I've gone ahead and added the second bead in one of my peyote rows, and I'm coming back towards the center. Because it's 4 wide, there's no really good center bead, because it would be needed to kind of come out the middle of the rows. And I'm going to bring my button out as close to the center as I can. But to get it so it is kind of flush along the end there, I'm going to be adding 3 15-0s, and then I'm going to sew through the round trio bead. And what that's going to do is create and bridge kind of that gap. So it's creating a line to bring my clasp out of. On this side here, I'm going to link into the bead on this side. I'm going to link from the brass to the brass, and it's going to take more than 3 beads to do it. It's going to take about 5 of my 15-ohs. So I'm going to put on 5 of those crystal apricot, and I'm going to go back through that round trio bead. It's in the second row back from the end, and my needle is going to come out in the middle. So I'm going in from the side and coming out towards the middle. So that creates just a little bit of a bridging here and a kind of covering of the gap that's going on. I'm then going to take my thread and needle through the bottom hole of the bronze colored round trio. That's going to hide any thread. And I am going to just show a tiny bit of thread here on the end. I'm going to pick up the middle hole, which we've been ignoring the whole process, and sew through the middle hole of that bronze bead. If you're doing this with a round duo or something with 2 holes, you can go through the top hole too, doesn't matter. I'm then going to come through the last hole, so I'm just weaving in the 3 holes, going up, down, and back up. And I'm coming out then on the side of the round trio bead before the 3 seed beads, and that's going to get me as close to center as I can in order to add my beautiful button there. So to add that button, I'm going to be adding some seed beads as well. So I'm going to get a couple more of those out, and I'm going to be coming out and using kind of that X design. So what I'm going to do to get out to the button, and I'm going to go in the back of the button here. So you want to set it down so it almost looks like it's in a cone shape. That would be the back. And I'm going to add 5 of my 15-ohs. I'm going to sew up the back there, coming towards the front, so towards the crystal-y side. I'm going to add 3 15-ohs. And I'm going to come down on the opposite side here of the button. So I'm not going across the button, I'm going right beside the hole. So your seed beads are going to line up front to bottom. You're not going to cross over the button. When you're coming out the back then, you're going to add 2 15-ohs, skip the first 2, and go into the last 3. What that's going to do is create a little Y there. You can see here, and we're going to pull nice and tight. I'm going to come back up then and do the same thing basically on the other side. So I'm going to add 5 seed beads. I'm going to go through one of the holes that's open on the cup button, or on the faceted button, add a seed bead, sew through the middle from the previous 3, add 1 more seed bead, and sew down. That's what's going to create that X effect. I'll show you there. So it's a little bit hard to see because of the color, but you have that nice X effect then there in the middle. Once I'm coming out the end here, I'm going to add my 2 seed beads and sew through the last 3 from that same side. So it ends up being that you have 2 of those Ys. So you'll have it, and you can see it there. Give it a nice tight pull, and you can see it's kind of hanging out there. What we're going to do is we're going to anchor it a little bit more by sewing. I'm coming out of the round trio bead. If you remember, we're going to sew through the 3 seed beads across the round trio bead, coming out the end here. And when I do that, you can instantaneously see it pulls it a little bit tighter and a little bit more to level. I'm going to come through those beads then on the end here, those 4 15-ohs that have decorated up the end a little bit, and come back into the middle of the project. When I come into the middle of the project then, I I'm going to go ahead and knot off my thread. Usually I'll reinforce these threads a lot. You can come back up and do that if you want to. Because it has 4 pieces of thread going through, I'm not going to worry about going back up through, but if you want to, you're more than welcome. What I'm going to do is grab onto a bridge thread, or a thread that's connecting 2 beads, sew underneath it and make a loop. In this loop then, I'm going to drop my needle through and create a knot. And somehow I got a little knot created there that I didn't want. I'm going to figure out why I have this knot going on. I think I got a little caught up there in my tail. And then once we have our knot created, I'm going to sew back a little bit further and make another knot. So I've gone ahead and tied knots off in 3 other places, and what I'm going to do is cut off the extra thread. I'm leaving just a little tiny bit of thread because I do glue the ends of my project, even though I think I did 4 knots in there. And I'm going to flip back over to the other side of my bracelet. I'm going to mirror what I did on this side here on my closure side, taking off my stop bead. Usually you can just apply a little bit of pressure and pull that off. If you can't pull it off, you can put your needle on and actually force the end back through the bead. I'm going to flatten out the end of that thread and then thread this needle. Once I have the needle threaded, I'm going to go ahead in to my project, even out those missing seed bead areas like we did on the other side. This one doesn't want to cooperate. Sometimes towards the end of the project the needles will get gunk, kind of just thread residue built up in them, and they're sold in packs of 50 for just over $2. So when it gets to that, or I'm sorry, bags of 20. When it gets to that, or if they get really beat up, or bent up, I just kind of toss them. So what I'm going to do here at the end then is I'm coming out that first bronze bead that I added, and I'm going to add my 4 beads, my 4 15-0s on the sides, going back then towards the middle. In between here, I'm going to add 3 of my 15-0s to get over to my magic wine bead, and then I'm going to add 5 15-0s in order to get back to the previous, or the second row of magic wine coming towards the middle. And again, that just mirrors then that opposite side. What I'm going to do then is, like I did previously, I'm going to go through the bottom hole of that bead closest to the middle, which in my case here is that magic wine bead. I'm going to go through the middle hole, and then I'm going to go through the end hole coming out. Once I'm at that end hole, I want to make sure not to catch on any seed beads. And when I'm coming out here, this is my opportunity to make my loop for my faceted button. So I'm going to make my loop for that button out of my 15-0s, and I'm going to use about 30 to 34 15-0s. You want the loop to be big enough that your button is going to be able to comfortably fit through. If you're not using a button and you're using a clasp closure, I always think it's a good idea to use wire protectors. That way your thread's not right up against your metal. One of the reasons that I like the buttons so much, not only because they're easy to put on, but because they don't have any metal to them, they're not going to affect people that have metal allergies. So it's a nice thing that if people are really horribly allergic to different metals, if you add the buttons, the nice thing is you don't have to worry about it. I'm going to keep going, adding some of these 15-0s here, those little tiny guys. And you could use, if you have handy, 11-0s for this instead. Because I'm using 15-0s for the project, I'm using those for my loop as well. Generally speaking, I actually like the 11-0s to be my loop, but because we're doing the project in 15, I didn't want to have you guys have another size of seed bead. Different than the start of the bracelet, instead of going right back in here, I'm going to make that loop go around my last round trio bead through the first hole. And what that's going to do is really create that open loop for my button to fit inside. If you don't like the open look, you can make a V, kind of like we did on the button side, by adding it. Let's see, and of course I'm twisted up in there. But you can add the V look to it by going back into that same area that you were coming out of rather than around the bead there. I'm going to reinforce this loop because I right now only have one thread going the whole way through. So I'm going to take my needle and thread the whole way through that loop that I just created. And then when I get to the other side here, I'm going to knot off just like I did on the previous end. So I reinforced this loop and I'm just going to dab some super glue here on the ends. And some people are really against the gluing. What I always try to tell people is you're not gluing the beads, you're gluing the thread. That's why a lot of people are against gluing, is because you end up gluing a lot of holes shut. And sometimes if you're using stretchy string or something like that, it can dry rot a little bit. But what you're really doing is you're gluing the thread ends together and just kind of gluing those threads to one another. I cut down the thread short, and then I always pick up my thread zap and I burn down the little tail that's left, and that actually creates a little bit of a ball on the end of your thread, which also prevents it from coming through other beads or from the knot pulling out. And it's also fun to use, so that's just a little added bonus. But then there you have the end of your peyote stitch bracelet. When you have it on, it has that nice iridescence fall look. If you are doing a 7 to 7 1/4 inch wrist or bracelet like I did here, you are going to be able to do 2 out of your bag. What you want to do is at the end, just kind of ignore that last little row. That's going to make it a tiny bit shorter. I used 76 here in the bag, so if you just use one less on the end and just kind of create a V effect with your bracelet, then you'll be able to make 2 no problem in that 7 1/4 inch wrist. I could have really stopped a lot earlier because I have about a 6 1/4 to 6 1/2 inch wrist, so I usually like my stuff about 6 3/4 inches, and I have a long way that I could have stopped a couple rows back, so that's something to keep in mind. But this one here did use those 76 beads. So it's just a way to have fun using the peyote stitch with this awesome faceted check glass, as well as the other round trio beads. You can switch it up, put different beads in with it, decorate the sides, come back down and decorate using other beads in the spaces. So really play up. Just a great way to use the faceted cuff buttons with those faceted round trio beads. Again, if you need any of these supplies, you can check out our Potomac Bead Company locations at potomacbeads.com. You can also shop there online. You can follow us on Facebook, as well as subscribe to this page to get regular updates on products, as well as more tutorial updates when we have new things coming at you. And you can always do the show more details, or under the details here, right under the video, and get links to any of the projects or any of the products that you may need that were used here in this project. So if you get a chance, grab some of these faceted round trios. They're really fun to play with. There's some awesome videos out there on YouTube using some of them by some gorgeous designers as well. So thanks a lot for watching the diagonal peyote with the faceted and the round trio beads.